Hello and welcome to the morning Liverpool stream. I'm joined by my fellow Liverpool.com writer, Dave Comerford, and today we're going to talk a few things about transfers and potential players being looked at by Liverpool. Obviously, the main headline is Benfica after last night, very convincing win in the Champions League, 5-0. And apparently Liverpool were on a scouting mission in Portugal. There were two Benfica players being watched. One was Antonio Silva, and the other one was Florentino Lewis. What do you make of those two, David? Do you think they'll be good fits for Liverpool?
Well, I've written about both of them for Liverpool.com over the past few months. If we start with Silva, I mean he's part of a defence which is the best in the Premier League. I mean Benfica are just running away with the league generally, I think. But they've obviously got that kind of stable foundation. I'm just gonna get the exact stats up here. I mean they've conceded 13 goals in 23 matches. So credit to him for his role in that. And he just looks like, one of the most sort of talented, exciting young centre halves in Europe, really. One of the things I remember from writing the piece was that Benfica had played PSG at home in the Champions League in the group stage, and they think they'd drawn. And one of the things that the analyst kind of said at the time was that he kind of neutralised Kylian Mbappe. So obviously he's shown already that he can. Whilst he isn't maybe playing in a top 5 league, he's shown that he can kind of cope when he's faced with the most difficult opponents. And he also, despite only being kind of 18, 19 years old, he started in the last World Cup group game for Portugal, which I think was against South Korea, I want to say. So, he's making a lot of progress. He's kind of really building up his reputation this season. It's kind of his breakout year, and it's really impressive. And like Florentino Luis, he is another one of those Benfica players with kind of a huge release clause. But again, you wonder like how much Benfica will actually demand on that. And yeah, Florentino, the partner in the 4-2-3-1 that Benfica had with Enzo Fernandez in that midfield, and it was kind of quite a revered duo. Obviously, with Fernandez generating more hype, becoming the most expensive player in Premier League history, but Florentino as well in his own right was performing very well. And he kind of had this brilliant track record at youth level, kind of in the sort of under 17, under 19 European Championships, then slowed down a little bit, but now he's really kind of starting to justify his potential. I think there's previously been interest from City, from Man United, teams like that. So he's definitely on the radar of a lot of top clubs. He's kind of this, from what I remember, he's just kind of elite level ball winner within that midfield, but he's also someone who's kind of got that range of passing to kind of like spread the play from those sort of deep line positions. So, he was definitely someone who I looked at and thought could be an exciting addition. But the problem you have with him is, if you sign him, is that you saying, right, Fabinho is no longer our first choice? And maybe that's fair enough after this season, but then you also think, what does it mean for Stefan Bajcetic? I mean, I think Florentino Luis is only a young player himself, so you basically just be blocking his path long term. These are considerations that Liverpool have to have, and I really think the defensive midfield one is fascinating this summer.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think Florentino Lewis kind of reminds me, not in playing style, but in terms of the career path to Renato Sanches. Obviously, he was highly rated, got a big move, didn't quite impress, and then kind of moved down a little bit and succeeded afterwards. And obviously with Lewis as well, I know he kind of struggled under Mourinho, but now he seems to be back in his fine form. And Silva as well, I think he's someone who just his name keeps propping up for Liverpool, so it feels like there might actually be genuine interest in him. And I think in terms of, you mentioned, it's hard to gauge his quality because he's playing in a league that might not necessarily be the strongest, but at the same time, the Portuguese league has, delivered Luis Diaz to Liverpool, Darwin Núñez, and elsewhere. Bruno Fernandes has recently been able to make the step up relatively easily, and I think obviously the prime example being that Silva is at Benfica is Ruben Diaz as well, who came into City, of course, and probably became one of the best defenders in the Premier League alongside Virgil van Dijk.
Yeah, there's a huge, obviously, sort of talent line from the Portuguese leagues. And I think what really impresses me is how when they sort of sell a player to Premier League for big money, inevitably within a couple of years, there's someone either they've kind of bought on the cheap or someone has come through their academy a lot of the time who's been able to kind of just fill in. So they've got a kind of a well-oiled machine going. I think that the thing with the kind of standards is not so much like you can kind of look at those top teams and the players they produce. And that could be kind of indicative, but also I suppose the question mark you have is I think the reports from 90 Min on these two players was that they were watching them in action on Friday night when they were playing Famalicao. I'm not sure if I've said that right, but you're looking at teams like that, 12th in the league, and you're like, what kind of quality do they have? So the good thing with players like Silva, I suppose, and Luis is that you can obviously watch them in the Champions League, and I know yesterday they thrashed Club Brugge about 5-1 or something like that. So they're going to be in the quarterfinals, and maybe they'll get a match up with one of the very best in the quarters, and then you can see how they do on that stage.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's going to be interesting. But moving on, I think there's been two other players who've been linked. Josko Gvardiol, again, he's someone, like I said, similar to Silva, whose name keeps cropping up when it comes to Liverpool. We know, of course, that he's a Liverpool fan, but he does have a very hefty release clause. I think it's around £98 million. It's going to be hard for Liverpool to pay, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, first things first, it's hugely exciting to see like the reports of interest. We're looking at alongside Canate, arguably kind of the best kind of up and coming centre back in Europe. And I wrote recently that if Liverpool were able to get him, then you're looking at what is potentially like the best centre half partnership in the world for like a long period there, if you can get those two. And I think this is almost it's going to be the sort of defensive equivalent of the Jude Bellingham race as well, because you've got, I know Fabrizio Romano said yesterday that Man City wanted him, Chelsea wanted him last summer. I think he referred to him as one of the most wanted players in Europe. So he is kind of, in terms of his profile, is probably kind of the centre-back version of Bellingham. And obviously the difference here is that he's got a release clause next year, like you mentioned, which is going to make it kind of a case not of agreeing a deal with Leipzig, but just of tempting the player. But still, I think it's going to be a huge transfer scrap because everyone knows how much potential he has. The problem for Liverpool is this summer, they're not going to be able to afford it, realistically. But we know Bellingham's the top target, and you're not going to be able to bring in a player who's going to cost, let's say 130 million, and then a player who's going to cost kind of the best part of 100 in Gvardiol, without kind of major sales, plural. You're not going to be able to do that. So then you're thinking, right, well, let's wait till next year. He's got a release clause, then maybe he can be next year's marquee signing. But the problem with that is, can Liverpool wait a year before they sign another centre-back? Some people would say no, on the basis that Matip might go this summer, 12 months left on his deal. And even if he doesn't, you think he's shown some sort of signs of decline this year. Gomez has been unconvincing. Do you need kind of that upgrade there behind Canate and Van Dijk, especially given, Canate's injury record? We don't know what's going to happen with Van Dijk and his fitness. So I think it's almost a case of, because Liverpool need a centre-back this summer and aren't going to be able to afford Gvardiol this summer. I think when I was writing about this yesterday, I said it is almost like the perfect player at the wrong time, which is kind of how it feels. Like sometimes transfers, the window just needs to line up, and I'm not fully sure that this one will.
Well, I would beg to differ, because that would suggest Liverpool should have signed a midfielder last summer, didn't.
True.
Wait it out for Bellingham, and I wouldn't be surprised if Liverpool make the same sort of move again this time around, because that's just the way Liverpool tend to do business. If they have a top target, and if Guardiola is that top target, I think they're going to hold out and get him when he is available. And when it comes to the transfer scrap as well, I think the fact that he is a Liverpool fan, he's made it clear he supported Liverpool growing up. I think that's going to be a huge pull for Liverpool and a huge advantage against maybe more financially better options. Potentially, if City and Chelsea are interested, Liverpool will be able to offer something that those teams don't necessarily have.
Definitely, and I mean, we've probably seen similar with the Jude Bellingham race. Not necessarily a Liverpool fan growing up, but someone who idolised Steven Gerrard, and wouldn't be surprised that all of Liverpool have used that in the negotiations, just with things like maybe dangling a meeting with Gerrard in front of him, or using him to try and persuade him, and maybe offering him the number 8 chair, things like that. You use everything you can to your advantage, and when it comes down to everyone knows they're going to pay the money, and it just comes down to tempting the player, then these little things do actually work in your advantage. Yeah.
Well, it's going to be interesting if Bellingham signs, if he's going to take on the number 8 shirt, like you mentioned, because he does like to wear that 22. I think he wore it at Birmingham. Birmingham, it was 14 or 22 as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, I just think with obviously Keita, is it likely to leave as a free agent, and it's kind of vacant. It just kind of makes sense.
Yeah, we'll see. First he has to sign, so
yeah.
Let's get that wrapped up.
Sure.
But a quick mention of another player being linked is Jurrien Timber of Ajax. He's 21 years old, can play centre back and full back as well. What do you make of that interest?
I remember at the World Cup, I think De Ligt was used as the right sided centre back on a back three, and he came out publicly and said, no, this role suits Timber better. And one of the things that strikes me, obviously Liverpool have faced him in the Champions League, is he's incredibly comfortable on the ball. I mean, you're not going to find many more centre backs who don't look like centre backs really when they have the ball. So I think as a modern centre half, he's a very good option. Strongly linked with Man United last summer, if I remember correctly. Obviously, as a former player of Ten Hag too. I mean, again, he's not going to come cheap. I think United probably found that last year. And the thing I remember with him is that he said before the Champions League game this year that he was going to boss Darwin Núñez, and then Núñez obviously scored at the Amsterdam Arena. So that didn't end up going too well for him. But maybe that kind of points to his kind of personality as well, his kind of his bullishness. And yeah, again, another one of those sort of young centre backs who, if Liverpool ended up signing them, you think you're not really going to go far wrong with a player like that. He definitely seems like he's going to get a big move eventually.
I know it's a bit of a cliche, but the only thing I'm concerned about him, and the reason why he often plays fullback as well, is his height. He's not necessarily the tallest, and while you can be a good defender, we saw Lisandro Martinez kind of struggle against Liverpool and Núñez's height against Manchester. I mean, for Manchester United against Liverpool. So I do think that's somewhat of a concern, especially in the Premier League. So it'll be interesting if Liverpool do make a move, because I see Timber more as a sort of backup for Trent and a backup for Robertson potentially.
Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting to do it that way, because it kind of be a little bit of a Joe Gomez figure then, where it's kind of like a centre back on the right, and then you're sort of looking at what can that kind of offer you, like tactically, in terms of a player who maybe is a little bit more in that kind of Ben White role as a right back. So yeah, you can see that too. I mean, Liverpool like to bring in players who can cover multiple positions. It's rare that they bring someone in who can just play one role. And maybe they will want that kind of option. I mean, depending on how much progress Calvin Ramsey can make next season, and if Milner goes, they might want that kind of stopgap who can work as a right back as well. Who knows?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I think one thing is for certain, Liverpool are going to be a lot more active in this summer transfer window than they were last year. So that's going to be fascinating to watch. Thanks, David, for joining me. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in and leaving your comments. As always, do check out all the written content on liverpool.com and the rest of the Blood Red content going out today as well.